One of the most important skills in cinematography is learning how to identify and leverage the unique characteristics of a location to support your story. This becomes even more important when you don't have full control over the environment, whether that's event videography, documentaries, low-budget films, or in my case, corporate films. In this frame, every decision from the composition and lighting to the use of negative space was driven by the environment itself. I leaned into the strength of the location to create a stronger image and better support the narrative. Let's dive right in. Unfortunately, we all know the struggle of shooting on location. It's never perfect. And sometimes it's actually the worst, right? Like you walk into a space and they give you like this empty room with nothing to work with. So it's very challenging. And I recognize that this is not that. I understand that this has a lot of awesome features for me to work with. But I think the point is, in every situation, our job is to really identify how we can best support the story with the location that we have on hand. And we had a lot of decisions to make here because we want that shot to not only look nice, but it has to represent our client. It has to communicate the story that we're trying to communicate. And in this particular case, it's a financial advisory firm, and we want to show strength, confidence, expertise, sophistication. And so all of those messages need to fit within this frame. One of the first things that I saw was obviously this depth. And I wanted to use the whole length of the room. And with that, it kind of, I don't want to say forced me, but it guided me, the space guided me towards framing my subject dead center and looking straight into the lens. And I've done a lot of those. I'm starting to do even more of them, just simply because the feel of that look visually really communicates strength and confidence, and they're talking directly to their audience. And so this room really supported that. I felt like if I would off-center him, I don't think I would have been able to frame it this way. Like I don't think I could have just simply shift him to this side and keep this frame that way. A lot of times, and it's the case in this one, it's about symmetry for me. When I see, those chairs, and then it just keeps going with chairs here, and we have those windows on this side, we have this wall on this side. It's creating those leading lines, and so it's guiding me towards framing the shot that way. And then once I have the camera in that position, the decision to place the subject dead center or to the side to me was obvious, because I don't want his head to be lost somewhere in here or lost somewhere in here, hiding this couch, for example. And so placing him dead center, again, is a decision that I embrace because it supports the story, but it's also really much guided by the space itself. A lot of time I walked into a space and I'm like, there's no way I'm going to shoot this dead center just because the symmetry is not there or the room just doesn't call for it. So even though we have windows all around here, there are no views out of this windows or any of those side windows. The skyline is actually behind the camera. And it became important for me to go look and see what was outside of this window, because that was really the only window that we were going to really see in the shot. And when I walked over there, all it was kind of like a rooftop with a crane for for people to move equipment or whatever into the skyscraper. So it was obvious that I didn't want to see any of that. It just looked awful. It looked very industrial. That really guided my decision on how I was going to expose the room to make sure that this window was overexposed and that the crane would disappear. So you make your decisions on the creative side of how shallow do you want your depth of field? Do you have constraint on the shutter speed to make sure none of those lights are flickering? So all those practicals up on the ceiling, I have no control over. This is an open space, a public space, and I don't have control over turning those lights off. So Is there a restriction on the shutter speed to make sure that those lights are not flickering? So you do all of those things first. And I always add ND filters to my camera settings. And that's how I would then control my exposure. You can see the camera settings here. So I'm shooting out of an f2 with native ISO of 800. Shutter is 1/60th. The key here is the ND filter. I always start with a lot of ND filter before I do my exposure. That way it gives me the flexibility to move up and down, move my levels up and down, and maintain the same ratio. So again, it was just about turning that ND filter to a level where that window was blown out. And this is 100% IRE, is that orange. And now I'm all set. Now that I've done my camera settings, I don't touch my camera anymore. And now it becomes all about lighting and shaping that light into the subject to make sure that he or she is exposed properly. So obviously the main thing is the key light to bring enough levels on my subject. And I want to make sure that in order to make the lighting look natural, I want to make sure that that key light comes from the window side. And so I put the Amaran 360C, and I really like pushing it through this 4x6 diffuser. It just, instead of using the softbox, like I used to use this little softbox as my key light source, but it just started creating like more of a, it's not obvious, like most people wouldn't see it, but to me it was too narrow. I could kind of see the outline of my lighting, and it just became a lot more focus and a lot more sourcey. Using this 4x6 really helped not just soften the lighting, but spread it evenly, especially when the shot is pretty wide and we see a lot of the subject, like, if it's waist up or knee up, versus using the softbox. So that's really my typical setup. For a backlight, I use the Amaran 200X with the softbox. I wanted to try to be more directional with the backlight. I didn't want to be right behind the subject. It would have been difficult to do anyway, just because the frame is so wide. I have a boom arm, but then it becomes difficult to hold the weight of a heavy backlight when it's too far out. I just don't carry sandbags with me, so it just becomes a little tricky. But I wanted to kind of use, you see this light coming through the window, like it's doing this, right? Like every window. And so this direction that we see even on the floor here, right? Like we see it this way. I wanted to kind of use that same angle. And that's why I placed the backlight in that particular location. I was trying to mimic the angle of the natural light. But at the end of the day, I feel like I didn't push it hard enough. And part of it was because we had it pretty harsh originally. And you can start seeing it on my subject. And I shot, I think, 5 interviews that day, exactly the same way. We didn't move anything. We just adjusted the backlight and the key light if we needed to. But, I didn't get the effect that I wanted, which was more of a directional, more of a visible, harsher edge on him. One of the last things we needed to do was to add a neg, not to create more contrast on his face. We already have plenty of contrast between the window and the non-window side. But that was really to just block some of those practical lights that were shining down on our subject, and we could see those reflection again on his forehead. And we see a little bit of it here and here. I didn't have enough neg or rigging to be able to cover this whole thing. Ideally, I would have been able to do that or turn off that particular section of the ceiling, but we had zero control over those lights. So, if I had more stands and more frames to block all of those, it would have been ideal. But we just place it where it was the most dominant, and I believe it's this particular one that really created a big glare on our subject. And so by removing that, we were able to clean all that up. This composition left me with a lot of negative space, and that's the space around my subject, all that empty space. And some people like a lot of negative space, some people don't. Again, I think it needs to support your story. If you're interested, you can look at last week's video that I did on the movie Sinners and how they use symmetry and center framing. And I talk about negative space. When you have symmetry, you communicating order and organization. And when you add negative space, you create a contrast with that, of saying this vastness. It could be, and in our case, we're talking about finance. And so now you're saying this person who's in complete control of this vast environment, the vastness of your financial picture, is in full control. And so that's the message. And so the negative space here is intentional in a way. It's, again, shaped by the space, because if I want to remove some of that negative space, I would have moved the camera closer and we would have lost, those practicals. We would have lost, this frame. And I think at that point, it just becomes very different, right? Like if I remove this, it just becomes, it just becomes very different. And so using, again, the vastness of the room to communicate the vastness of your financial picture, and to place this person at the center of your financial picture, and to make it look organized and clean and taken care of, again, support the narrative. So all those decisions are shaped by that space, but they need to fit the story that I'm trying to tell. If you found this video useful, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more cinematography tips and breakdowns. And if you'd like to learn more about creating better images, check out my online course, Essential Camera Settings. It's designed to help you understand and control your camera so you can spend less time guessing and more time focusing on your storytelling. Thanks for watching, and happy filming.